Ruth, this is the dog park reporting. On page 69, Roberts rails against the Swam Poodle Dog Park in Washington, D.C. for having too much room for dogs to play and not enough for children, blaming this on the anti-family culture shaping legislation, regulation, and enforcement throughout our sprawling government. I spent time in Republican politics. This is so extreme and so radical and so bizarre. It doesn't have its tentacles in anything remotely familiar to me. This hatred for childless women or women who want any control over when and if they have kids, and clearly the hatred for men or women who have dogs is so pathological. I want to understand its role in moving America toward an authoritarian state.
May I say that these far-right extremists seem to have a problem with animals, between the governor of South Dakota shooting an animal and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with the bear cub, thinking he could have a dead bear cub and finding it would be a fun joke. And this. But actually, what I take away from the dog park thing, it's very scary because all of this discussion we've had, authoritarianism is about lifting regulations and rules for the very rich, for the elites, through privatization, deregulation. So more rights, more freedoms for them, and fewer rights and more controls for everybody else. And so this obsession with childlessness, and it goes back, as Angela said, to the idea that women would have choice, that women have autonomy over their bodies, over their destiny, the timing of their families, who's in their family, who they marry. All of that is part of a war on women. By the way, it's also very fascist, especially if you link it to the kind of great replacement of white Christian births thing. And Mussolini, some of the language we've heard reminds me of Mussolini, who in the late 1920s, he said, he was obsessed with these things too. And he said, the cemeteries are full and the cradles are empty in Italy. And he had a whole program, no contraception, no abortion. Also, Vance talks about penalizing people who don't. It's not just that they're bad people. You should actually, as Angela said, use policy to penalize people who won't have kids. And so not only was there extreme controls under fascism on women's autonomy and taking away reproductive rights, but there was a tax on bachelors imposed on in the late 1930s to punish men as well, in the interest of growing the family and having more white Christian babies. So although this is a blueprint for the future, it's a blueprint that echoes the fascist past.
Ruth, let me play again JD Vance's attack on women who make the choice not to have kids or families.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Because it's so outrageous and offensive, every time I've seen it before today and before reading these sections from the book, I've had sort of an emotional reaction. But when you lay a political lens over it, it's catastrophic for the Trump-Vance ticket. I mean, Trump was tied to Project 2025 because all of his people made it and run it. But in terms of what he projects to his own voters, it's so promiscuous that Trump could have tap danced away from it, at least in the eyes of some of his base. I'm guessing, maybe not, but he would have tried to. But by doubling down on the walking, talking embodiment of the hatred toward childless women, the intolerance for marriage equality, the authoritarianism that drips off every page, and then writing the foreword for the book, that the guy that makes it, Trump is now attached to this in a way that you can't walk away from politically. And I wonder, Ruth, the First Amendment protects the right to say all these things, right, and to write it, and someone wanted to publish it, and that's fine. But everything else is up to the electorate. And what is sort of the political response to extremism like this?
Well, first of all, these people don't want to be liked. They want to be feared. And in a way, when Trump says we don't need the votes, often what extremists do is that they know that the reason they need to consolidate power and eventually make elections into a hollow shell without much meaning is that they know that their extremist, population hating, women hating, gay hating things are unpopular, but they don't. So they can't rely on the popular vote anymore because they would lose. So the GOP is locked in this thing where it's become so extremist, it's distanced itself from the desires and aspirations and actual principles of many Americans. And thus, they have to be on this course to seize power at any cost. And Roberts is part of this, and so is Vance. And the original title of the book was Burning Down Washington. And, Roberts may have a CEO title, he may wear nice suits, but he is less than 1 degree away from jailed extremist agitator Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon's language from deconstructing the administrative state, this is a war on democracy, a war on government, a war on the American people. It's very extremist. And his fingerprint is all over this. And Roberts also frequently was going on Bannon's war room. So we have to be mindful of exactly how extremist this whole thing is. And when you're in this universe, there's always a war on women. There's always a kind of demographic, racist, component to, and this is the Orban playbook. There's a reason Orban, when he comes to Washington, he doesn't see Biden. He goes to kiss the ring of Trump, and then he goes to kiss the ring of Kevin Roberts. These are kindred spirits in the interests of growing white Christian civilization. So all of this is very predictable, and they really don't care what the American people think.
So, Ruth, what is the best way to defeat this ideology if you're among the majority of Americans who finds it incredibly offensive and not the way any of us want to live?
I think that it's very important to call it out so that Americans, deserve to know what is coming if they vote the Republican ticket. Because, although Project 2025 and all of them are talking about restoring self-government to Americans and making the state smaller, small government. Actually, as Angela pointed out with the dog parks, what they have planned is a degree of control over our everyday lives, which is positively authoritarian. But, that's what the dog park thing is about, too. That's what the control of bodies is about. That's what putting the 10 Commandments in classrooms is about. Denigrating teachers, talking about workers as bad if they strike. So they want to control small and big things of our lives while they have the fiction of restoring, power to the American people. So we need to call these contradictions and hypocrisies out so that people can make an informed choice, because this is the most important election of our lives.